and we can take on some of the problems in the wider society.
All right.
See, I think the new thing today is business is so powerful. You know, when Adam Smith wrote his book 200 years ago in 1776 in The Wealth of Nations, the power group were governments. It was.
Yes, I see what you mean.
But today, business is really has most of the power in the world. I mean, if you look at the annual budget of some of the big companies, take some of the largest companies here in this country or in the United States, those budgets are greater than 90% of the nation states of the world.
Okay. So you're saying that unlike 200 or 300 years ago, businesses have a much greater social responsibility, and that is sort of the new face of the 21st century business?
Yeah, I think most people in ethics, certainly I argue, where there is power, there is also responsibility.
Okay.
And I think companies are stepping up to the plate and saying, okay, we can't do everything, but we can do something.
All right, good, good. Lots of very necessary information. All right, well, we're speaking today with Professor Oliver Williams of the University of Notre Dame. We'll be right back. Coming up next, find out how ethics and human rights affect economy. Heart to Heart. Today we are joined by Professor Oliver Williams from University of Notre Dame. Well, how does all of that affect the economy? How does ethics affect economy, or doesn't it? It must.
Well, I think I certainly have argued in developing countries, it's important to be known to be corruption-free or very low corruption, because then you get investors who are interested in coming in.
Okay.
If a potential investor looks over your country and says, this is such a dishonest country that, you know, corruption means an additional 20% tax.
Okay.
Everybody has their hands in our pockets. You're not going to get too many investors, and unfortunately this would be the case with some African countries like Kenya.
Okay.
But a country like Singapore, which is corruption-free, gets a lot of investment because people know that their money is going to be theirs.
Well, the UN Global Compact sponsored the 2010 Leaders Summit this past June. Tell us about that.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it was a great occasion. We had 1,400 people there. We had targeted 1,000. But we had over 1,000 major business leaders, and we had key NGOs, non-government organizations, sent representatives, groups like Oxfam and Human Rights Watch and environmental groups are members of the Global Compact as well, although most members are businesses. And really what we talked about at that meeting was, what's our vision for the next 10 years?
Yeah.
So it was really kind of a pep talk, if you will.
A homework giving session.
That's right.
Okay. Well, what kind of homework do you think Korea could take on, the businesses or the people who have joined the Global Compact?
Well, they have two study committees currently in the Korean network. One is to look at the MGDs, the Millennium Development Goals, and to see how Korean companies might be able to advance them in Asia and take on some projects. Maybe even in Korea. And for example, they might work with some of the poor and advance, upgrade education in some of the poor rural areas in Korea. Or they might go to Vietnam, where there's an awful lot of very poor people, and try to upgrade the infrastructure or the hospitals. And then the second committee that's in the Korean local network is to look at human rights and to see how they might be better advanced in Asia, particularly.
Having overseen the Global Compact, what were some of your major successes as you've seen it, or what are the largest problems that you're still facing today, do you think?
I would say the major success is the fact that we have so many companies that have joined in the last 10 years. You know, as I say, over 6,000. We started with 40. Nobody ever dreamed it would be that successful so quickly. And the fact that so many of these companies have taken on projects in the wider society to advance the Millennium Development Goals. I think the biggest problem we face is in the area of human rights, was in the Sudan, where PetroChina buys most of the oil and pays that money to the government of Sudan. And Sudan uses a lot of that money to buy armaments. to repress their own people in the Darfur area in particular. And so there's been a great outcry from many of the NGOs that I hear from, saying, how can you allow PetroChina to be in the Global Compact? Because they are complicit in human rights. They're not directly, but they're supplying the money which pays for the arms. And of course, our position is, let's sit down and talk to PetroChina, to some of the Chinese officials and the Sudanese officials, and try to persuade PetroChina to use their leverage to influence the Sudanese government, not to use the money that way. And we've been relatively successful. We have made some headway. China is saying, yes, we are becoming a world power. We do have to use some of our leverage to advance human rights.
Right.
And that's new.
Okay.
And I think quite an advance.
Yes. Well, how do you keep anybody honest? How do you quality control all the business, the 6,000 members?
Well, the best way to keep somebody honest is to have them grow up with a good mother and father who loved them and give them a good value system so that they have an internal control. That is, they want to do the right thing. But I think you also need sanctions. So if you do the wrong thing, you pay a penalty.
Okay.
The best sanction is the press. If you know, Samsung Tesco does the wrong thing, they get bad press, and their consumers, some of them at least, get irritated and maybe won't buy their product. So it behooves a company to be honest,
right,
to keep their consumers happy.
All right. Well, what kind of message do you want to leave with future businessmen for this 21st century global economy, you know, business leaders?
Well, I would say, first of all, to reaffirm that business is a noble vocation. To be a business person, you're doing great work. You're creating wealth, you're creating jobs, you're giving a possibility for a good life to many, many more people. And the evidence is there. We've pulled so many people out of poverty, particularly in Asia. But the second thing is you have to remind business they have immense power. And where there's power, there's responsibility.
Okay.
And so they ought to take on some of the problems in the wider society.
All right. Well, thank you. I learned a lot of new information. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, you can rewatch this episode with Professor Oliver Williams and learn more about the UN Global Compact. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.